I'm Spyro. What are you, some kind of goat?
Hello everyone! This video, we will be replicating the PS1 version of Spyro the Dragon as a costume head for some reason.
So I checked my YouTube analytics and it looks like you guys mainly like the first 30 seconds of these videos. So I'm going to try even harder to make the rest of this more entertaining.
You'll need foam, purple and yellow fabric, optional textured scale fabric for the horns, a foam head named Mr. Bob, or your own head I suppose, a foam wreath ring, hot glue as a placeholder, a sewing kit and machine to save time, sandpaper, a Dremel, tape, paint, paintbrushes you don't mind missing, a dual action paint gun, air dry foam, X-Acto knife, National Guard's 633 foam lock, and 2-part liquid plastic. I always draw myself a sketch of what I plan to do, but I also use these 3 reference photos. For a little spice of that creative liberty thing people do, I mixed aspects of all 3. You're going to measure out your first layer of foam around Mr. Bob. Then you're going to cut it and make sure it fits snugly. Afterwards, measure where it will dome on top like a beanie that is much too large for you. I myself watched a video on how to make a costume head around a year ago, and they hot glued everything together. However, I'm stubborn and want everything I replicate to last forever, so I researched and found this incredible foam glue. It works like magic. After reading the directions, you're going to spray this along both layers. You want to attach one to another and hold it till boredom begins to slowly digest your brain. I'd also recommend using gloves, but I lived and I didn't.
Yeah, but what are you gonna do?
When you've stuffed that perfect fitting tube back on the dummy, sorry Bob, cut about 4 cuts to fold down and create the top. The longer this is nitpicked over, the better your final result will be. Then, just as before, you're going to foam glue those sections together and trim off any excess. When it's dry, try that puppy on and jab your eyeballs to mark where the holes will be cut out. If your husband or dear friend is nearby, let them draw a face on you. They'll like that. Taking your most preferred Spyro reference on the whole internet, map out where more foam and parts of the face will be. My favorite has that forever concerned or sarcastic look. Because I didn't want to waste material, I glued several long pieces together. Maybe this foam will pop up in my next video too. Now, because this certainly won't take 15 minutes overall, just imagine that scene in Edward Scissorhands where he prunes the hedge into a delightful dinosaur in under 15 seconds.
A grand
Look!
slam for Martinez to make it a 5-run inning and blow this game to pieces.
I'll be darned.
Yeah, that one. You've got an amazing imagination.
Oh no!
This entire first step is really just creating a perfect skeleton for the outside, so you may spend quite a lot of time marking and cutting in an effort to get the best shape possible. Ta-da! Now we have hornless, scaleless, angry Spyro. Now you can form his eyebrows and get sidetracked, cutting out and snapping foam to make the horns instead of first making nostrils. The easiest way to make these symmetrical is measuring them against each other. I know I said that hot glue is a placeholder, but in this step, it may also melt your foam, so be very cautious. Giant holes are no fun to fill in later, especially because you do need to do a small amount of carving off camera. You can probably skip using extra fabric to pre-map this out, but I wanted to do everything in my power for this to be one uniform piece. I laid out some white fabric and pulled and tugged and marked it till I felt everything was securely flush. Now this is all going to seem a little bit tedious. You pin the fabric, mark the pin points in a fine line, trim the excess, pull that off, magically cut that same elephant-like shape into the purple fabric, repin that, mark the lines again, trim the axis off that, get sidetracked, cutting out the eyebrow fabric, cut off even more excess, then make the foam nostrils, cut out and hand sew those pieces, unpin your fabric, repin your fabric, and sew your fabric in the sewing machine, all besides the center mohawk. To make the center mohawk fin scales, I flattened that out where the open seam was and cut out my pattern to that line on more foam. Here, if you follow my same out-of-order technique, you'll want to measure out the inside of the foam with an extra piece of fabric or floppy measuring tape. Sew that up, try it on Bob, and make any form-fitting adjustments you'd wish, including eye holes, and make sure it fits nicely inside. When hand sewing the back line, it doesn't have to look perfect. It simply needs to be taut. You won't be able to see it later on. Glue down any mischievous sections and cut out the eyes with paper. I'm sorry, I just kept wanting to see my progress. Take those paper eyes and use them as templates for your air dry clay. I pressed a button into mine to create an outline for the pupils. From here, you don't even need to wait for those to air dry. The 2-part plastic I use has a 3-minute cure time, which allows you to layer it quickly over the eyes and horns. You can just glob that right on there. Around minute 11 and 30 seconds, you're going to need this slit in the fin to glue it seamlessly over the purple mohawk from earlier. Mush out the foam and clean up the edges of your eyes. I used a Dremel in my last video if you haven't seen it, but I didn't want to record it this time around. Anyway, that's how I cut out the pupils. Because I wanted to be seen while being unseen, I used the most delicate black fabric I could see through and plasticed that on the inside. I then used plastic to glue the eyes in and hid the seams in my nostrils by gluing fabric together and hand sewed them down off camera, because I didn't want to waste anyone's time watching me hand sew all that. To attach the fin, I pinned down the front and painted plastic and tacky globs, pinching and moving down in sections. This is when I finally decided to glue down and hand sew the inside to the outside. Now's when I opted to repeat the nostril process with the eyebrows. Why didn't I do that earlier? I used more clay to widen the base of his horns to the width of that can of foam glue. If you want added texture, paint glue over the top of that bumpy scale fabric, attaching it to the horns in a layer just thick enough so you don't have to spend forever buffing out sharp edges. Using all the same steps from earlier, you're going to pin, mark, unpin, and sew yellow fabric to cover the fin. However, instead of sewing it to the head, I used liquid plastic to decrease the chance of it creasing. Using this general palette, I suggest slowly building up color to your desired taste. You don't have to use an airbrush, it just gives your work a very gentle flush quality that may otherwise streak with a paintbrush. After all that jazz, I cut out where the horns felt right into the purple fabric, used painter's tape to hold them upright, and hot glued underneath the cut fabric before once again taking plastic, painting it down against the horns. Same palette, I chose to give my Spyro's horns a gradient and some highlights, then hand-painted his purple and red yearly growth rings and airbrushed that to create less harshness. I then cleaned my hands and blended purple into the horns. If you followed along, you should now have your very own Spyro costume head. Thank you all so very much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, maybe hit that bell, and let me know what you thought or would like to replicate with me.
Thank you for releasing me.
There is still some more satyrs trapped in stone.
What else was I gonna use the hat for?